On November 15th, 2025, the account No Context Means will post this screenshot from the r/animation subreddit. The image shows a user showing off their drawing of the character Frieren from the manga and anime Frieren Beyond Journey's End, with the post saying, "How do you guys able to draw at different angles?" Now the drawing that accompanies this post, well, I don't think I need to mention why this went viral, but this time around, the reaction felt a little different. Well, yes, some people were laughing at this, which I don't blame people for that. This is admittedly a very funny looking drawing. Others, more specifically artists, responded with words of encouragement and even took the drawing to angle themselves to prove that, yeah, it's actually a really deceptive angle to draw. And this was fun because a lot of artists around the world got in on this trend. Even teachers and industry professionals like Dana Terrace, who worked on many mainstream TV shows, showed off their artistic skills and even gave words of advice. Now, art trends on social media are nothing new, but this one, it felt very wholesome. And seeing all this just reminded me that art is hard, especially as a profession. Now, I've been drawing since I was young, as far back as kindergarten, which is the earliest stuff that has survived over the years. And back then, I would draw anything. Cars, airplanes, cartoons, it didn't matter. If I liked it, I drew it. And a lot of us can attest to that feeling. When you're a kid, nothing really matters. You don't really care if what you're doing is technically good or correct. You just do it because it's fun. An idea that unfortunately starts to fizzle out the more you get older. Because as you get older, you start to become more self-aware. You start to care about what random people think about you, what are your interests, and how those interests make you fit into everywhere else around you. Throughout elementary school, I would draw in so many journals and would even start to create comics. I remember specifically this one kid who, mind you, was very friendly and we had no beef, would sometimes look over my comics and kind of critique them. And this was back in the 5th grade, so in a way, it was like getting an early taste of being a comic artist having to deal with an editor-in-chief. But then came middle school, also known as the worst years of my life. This period of my life was filled with very few highs and was mostly middling, but it had some really bad lows. One of these bad lows was that I really couldn't find a group that I could call friends. So most of the time I was either by myself or desperately trying to connect with the other kids around me, which would usually end in disappointment. So this would start my introvert arc where I usually just kept to myself most of the time, and this would also bleed over into my art. Since I really didn't have anyone to share my art with who would care about it, so what was the point? So I would start drawing less and less. But almost all of that changed in high school. High school was a much better experience than middle school. It was because a lot of the kids who had sticks up their asses just finally mellowed out. I mean, people would still start gang wars in the lunchroom, but at least most of these kids felt very approachable this time around. And it was around this time where I finally started to develop my own friend group. One that I still have to this very day. One where I could finally talk about my interest and get some sort of feedback from. It felt so refreshing after years of just bottling away my interest. And this time frame was also relevant to art because it was around this era where I began to delve headfirst into the internet art scene. When I was a kid, most of my inspirations from drawing were from stuff I watched, played, or read. And you can definitely tell what I was into at the time based on my drawings. But it was around high school where I discovered places like DeviantArt and even more importantly, Tumblr. Now I know in the big year of 2025, Tumblr is kind of an afterthought, but there was a point in time where Tumblr was one of the biggest rising social media platforms on the internet. It was, and arguably still is, a very versatile platform. If you want to use it for microblogging or portfolios, you can use it for that. If you want to use it for news, you could also use it for that. And if you want to customize your own profile to your needs, you could do that. Something that nowadays I feel everybody acknowledges and feels like we desperately need back. But Tumblr was also a great hub for artists. If you were an artist who wanted to get at least some sort of visibility, Tumblr was one of your best bets. And when the site was at its peak was where I found some of my favorite artists. Sin Animation, Sandra Riva's art, Fui Jing Ling, Harsh Boogie aka Discount Supervillain, and so many others I could mention. During this era, it felt like everywhere you turn on the website, you'd find another artist putting out bangers. But unfortunately, if you know about the history of Tumblr, you know what's coming. In 2018, the admin staff of Tumblr would announce that due to various situations that were happening behind the scenes, all NSFW content was basically being banned by the end of the year. This announcement sent shockwaves throughout the entire website. As I alluded to before, Tumblr was a hub for artists. Both safe for work artists, but also not safe for work artists as well. And NSFW content flourished on Tumblr, to the point where it became a joke that people only use Tumblr to get their rocks off, which I'm not saying that wasn't true, but after that announcement, what would later be known as the Tumblr exodus began. Artists basically had three choices: pull a Eustace and not get out of that chair, delete or abandon your account and never come back, or just migrate to another website. Though I remember seeing a lot of artists personally on my timeline take the latter option, as this very situation basically made a bunch of artists migrate to Twitter, which of course allowed for NSFW content, or they went to other alternatives like Pillow Fort. Remember Pillow Fort? The Tumblr exodus was a huge thing at the time, and it made a lot of artists feel depressed, angry, unwelcome. And it sucks because I think Tumblr is actually a pretty good platform, at least functionality wise. Now remember when I mentioned that art as a profession / lifestyle is hard? Yeah, this is what I was talking about, and that's just one example. If you've been paying attention the past 5 years or something, then you know how hard artists have been getting screwed over, whether on these social media platforms or even within the professional workplace. Artists just cannot catch a break nowadays, and this is especially true if you're an NSFW artist or creator. That community has been getting absolutely annihilated these past few years. Even when you follow the rules and stay in your lane, you still get the whip. So it doesn't surprise me that many artists, casual or professional, feel very demoralized at the moment. It really does feel like these big platforms and institutions just don't care about art at all. But despite all this stuff going on, why did so many artists react so positively towards this one post? Well, that's because art is hard, especially as a skill in the craft. Now, if you were paying attention to my Tumblr recap, you probably recognized that I really didn't mention what I was doing in terms of my art at the time. And that's honestly because while I was very inspired by a lot of these artists, it never really translated to the sketchbook. I still did draw around the time, but it was very infrequently, and I think that was because I was intimidated. These artists were usually doing it on digital computers. I was still doing this in a sketchbook. And this reality would hit me even harder when COVID happened and I started to use Discord. I would join the servers of artists and creators who were all using tablets and programs. Meanwhile, I was sitting here with a sketchbook. Now, obviously, a sketchbook is not a bad medium of drawing. So many people make great art on the paper. But at the time, I really wanted to try out what drawing digitally would be like. And I would finally get that chance when a mutual gifted me a copy of Paint Tool Sci, along with me getting an XP Pen tablet for Christmas. So I went to my computer, set everything up, and then I realized that this was not very easy. I'm pretty sure every artist has that experience going from traditional to digital. Yeah, my experience was no better. My first few months within Paint Tool Sci were, rough, to say the least. Honestly, I think my biggest problem was that I didn't know what stabilization was. If I knew about that early on, it would have helped so much. But it wasn't just I didn't know what stabilization really was. It was also that I was inexperienced with anatomy, coloring, a lot of stuff I wasn't familiar with. So, unsurprisingly, I wasn't very satisfied with my output. All my friends and mutuals were putting out bangers and I was making this stuff. And due to that, I started to feel inadequate. I originally thought, okay, maybe it's the program that's the problem. So I ended up migrating to Clip Studio Paint, which I still use to this day. But I would still run into the same issues, honestly. And obviously, with hindsight being 2020, the problem wasn't the programs I was using. It was me. I was still learning. I still had stuff to learn, but my mind at the time didn't want to admit that. I wanted to be just as good as the other people around me when those artists probably went on a completely different journey of routine and improvement and repetition. So I decided I needed to learn my own way. Take and learn what I need as necessary to achieve what I want. At this time period, I was overwhelming myself and I needed to zero in on one specific thing. What I personally want out of my art. What makes me say, hey, that's pretty good, or hey, that's good, but it can be better. I have these two statements pinned to my work area, and they are very helpful, and reading them from time to time really sets me back on the ground level when it comes to this stuff. Whether it's art, making videos, or what have you. We are all going on our own journeys and nothing is really ever going to be perfect. But knowing that trying to make something and then going back and making it better later is 10 times a better outcome than just not doing anything at all. So, why do I like this image so much? They tried. because it is the first step of this individual's art journey. Our first few drawings were probably not very good by most standards, but we still tried to make something, even if it looked off. Tyler the Creator once said, "Create like a child, edit like a scientist." And what I get from that is, don't be afraid of your rough drafts. Don't be afraid of your sketches. Don't be afraid of your demo tracks. Create with the carefree mind of a child, because if you aren't getting some sort of enjoyment or satisfaction out of something, then why even bother? Art is hard, but at least try to have fun making it.
What's the single best piece of advice you would give to young filmmakers or actors that are just starting to make movies?
Have fun with it. You have to have fun. In my experience, if you're not having fun, you're not getting to the good stuff. The trick is, can you have fun when the pressure's on? When the cameras are rolling, can you have fun? When the whole crew, 100 people are watching you and the camera's rolling, can you have fun then? That's not easy. That's easier said than done. But that's the art.
Hey, Carla, we out here working, bro. I don't waste time.